Good morning. I'll call to order the May 4th, 2023 meeting of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Formation Commission. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Geyer.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner Kiriakou.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Osborne. Commissioner Patino.
Here.
Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Stark.
Here.
Commissioner Williams. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Osborne and Commissioner Williams are absent, and Commissioner Kiriakou and Commissioner Nelson will be our voting members.
All right. Please stand and join me in the pledge. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item of business is approval of the minutes from April 6, 2023. Are there any changes, corrections to the minutes?
There's one. Commissioner Hartman is listed twice as having voted on one of the first items. It's
Thank you for catching that.
it's I believe on the approval of the previous minutes of the March meeting. So it should be corrected to list 6 ayes and only list Commissioner Hartman once.
Okay, any other? May I have a motion then to approve the minutes as corrected?
I'll move to approve the minutes with the correction of the inadvertent double counting of Commissioner Hartman's vote.
Thank you, and we don't want that. A second, please.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Freeman.
Aye.
Commissioner Geyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou.
Aye.
Commissioner Patino.
Aye.
Commissioner Stark.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now it's time for public comment on items that are not on today's agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, I do have one request to speak under general public comment, and we will go here in our Santa Barbara hearing room to Planet Thunderstriker.
Hi, thank you. I'm E-Plant Thunderstriker. I'm interested in a World Citizens Organization. Countries have the option for 2 slots. One is a government individual. China mailed seeds through a Taiwan shipping company in 2020 when I gave that suggestion to the consulate in LA. I've been involved in a difficult situation with the music industry. Somebody tried to start something and it just didn't go well. And there was a border conflict between India and China, and the person was from India. So it's just really just that different issues going on in our community throughout the world that maybe can more comprehensively addressed through different people coming together. Of course, it would just be nice just to have something where people from different cultures and countries come together and aren't fighting with each other and maybe trying to organize something. So, of course, in America, we wouldn't necessarily have to have it, but because of the situation with the music industry, there's no nonprofit organization or anybody else that's doing anything besides me, and I just up to my here. So that's what it is, just a World Citizens Organization without any structure defined yet other than what China, Russia, North Korea would need in order to be a part of it. Countries have the option for 2 slots. One is a government individual. America would either have neither, we wouldn't have to, one or the other or both. And that's almost the extent of it. I mean, if that just started, because of the corruption that I'm dealing with in America, I just feel like if this was in the media, that could be brought to the table as starting maybe world peace. Right now, I'm dealing with a lot of issues here. I've been talking in front of the board and the city hall about a variety of issues going up to our current administration and the vice president, and how she's could be more appropriately involved considering what I've been and am dealing with now. Also, I have to point out that Ms. Hartman and the individual from the Isla Vista Community Services District have not done things that I would think would be appropriate for their position. And so that's just a concern that I can get adequate resources here and information and the way that it would develop and play out. And I, again, would like to point out that if all of this was in the media immediately, countries around the world would be talking about world peace. A lot of people who are just who are unappreciative of what's going on in our society, mass shootings, that might stop. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was our only public comment speaker. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, that is correct. And I would just like to briefly remind members who are joining us on Zoom today that if there is an item you would like to speak on, to please use the raise hand feature or *9 on your touch-tone phone when the item that you would like to speak on has begun, and we will call your name at the appropriate time.
Okay, so now we're moving to approval of our consent calendar. There's only one item, report on disbursements. Did anyone want to pull that item for further discussion? Seeing none, may I have a motion, public comment on this item?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. So may I have a motion that we accept the report?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino, Commissioner Patino.
Aye. Can you not hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye. Okay, Madam Clerk, out of service agency agreement number 1, would you read that into the record, please?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, out of agency service agreement number 1 is to consider recommendations regarding LAFCO application file number 23-01 for the 4 Sunrise Hill Lane out of agency service agreement for the city of Santa Barbara to provide potable water and sewer service to an undeveloped residential parcel.
Mr. Prater, you're going to make the presentation?
We will be blessed to have the presentation provided by our analyst clerk, Natasha.
All right.
This one. Thank you.
Ms. Carbajal.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have before you today an out-of-agency service agreement for 4 Sunrise Hill Lane to the city of Santa Barbara. This was an application that was submitted by the city of Santa Barbara through a resolution. It includes 1 parcel located at 4 Sunrise Hill Lane with a total of 3.94 acres. The property previously had an approved out-of-agency service agreement for water and sewer services from 2020. The new owners are seeking a permit from the county for 2 single-family residences and 2 accessory dwelling units on the property with the intent to apply for a lot split pursuant to SB 9. The city currently provides water and sewer services to other properties in the area with the capacity to service the property. This map provides a visual for the proposed service area of the property. This next map provides further details showing the property location and the city limits, as well as the sphere of influence boundary. The proposal area is within the city's sphere of influence. The current landowner and city have agreed to water and sewer service. The city 8-foot water main is located adjacent to the site, and multiple sewer lines exist in proximity on Nicholas Lane and Via Alicia. There are two options under Section 56-133. One, an impending threat to health and safety, which is not present here. And two, the property is within the sphere of influence of the agency and done in anticipation of future annexation. And we are utilizing option 2 for this project. The uses will be residential, 2 single-family residences with 2 accessory dwelling units. No changes in land use will be facilitated by the proposed out-of-agency service agreement. And the land use designations and zoning are residential in the county, zoned 2E1. The city's plan for services outline the adequate services, facilities, and improvements. The plan for services address the provision of governmental services and financing of improvements and can be found in Attachment B. It consists of an extension off of the existing city 8-foot water main, acquisition of all easements and construction of all pipelines, fixtures, and facilities to connect the property, and complies with all city laws governing the use, waste, or conservation of water and discharge of sewage. The proposal is categorically exempt pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21000, Section 15303, Class 3, Section 15320, Change in Organization of Local Agencies, Class 20, and Section 15061B3, Common Sense Exemption. Commission policy states that when property may ultimately be annexed to a city or a district, approval of an out-of-agency service agreement should require the landowners to agree to annex the territory with the consent to annex. The agreement approved by the city and landowner includes Condition 8, wherein owners consent. Annexation is not possible at this time because the area surrounding the property is not accessed directly from within the city limits. One must travel through areas of the unincorporated county to reach the site. The site is located in an area that allows the city to best provide water and sewer service in the future. And the city infrastructure, water main, and wastewater pipes are located within reasonable distances to the property. With that, staff recommends the approval of the request of an out-of-agency service agreement subject to the following terms and conditions listed here. And staff is available to answer any questions that the commission may have.
And do any commissioners have questions? Commissioner Stark?
I do. If I might, through the chair, is my understanding correct? This is an undeveloped parcel?
That is correct.
And the proposal is to build 2 units, 2 residential units on it, each with a auxiliary unit?
Correct.
And is the county okay with it, with this? I guess that's the main question. It's in the county and it can't currently be annexed. Is that my understanding correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The county will process the land use entitlement permits for this.
So I guess at the moment, there won't be any actual water or sewer service until the house is approved and constructed. Is that correct also?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And I assume anybody in Santa Maria or on Zoom will just call out if they do have questions. Any public comment on this item?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Commissioner Williams?
Well, I just, because I believe it's in my district, I just wanted to comment that it's very normal for areas of the unincorporated residential areas to be served by water and sewer in the city. You have to think about the city kind of not just as a city, but as a water and a wastewater district when it concerns this. So I think this is normal and should be supported.
All right, then Commissioner Guyer?
Have all the fees been paid?
It's a levity, finally. Yes, Commissioner Guyer, through the chair. Fees have been paid.
Okay, seeing no public comment and no more commissioner comments, we're ready for a motion A through D. In the staff report, they have a motion to approve.
I'll move A through D.
I'll second it.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino, Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, turning to business item number 1, our final budget. Madam Clerk? Did I miss?
We might have missed one, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, change of organization number 1. Key Site 2 annexation to CSA 5.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, changes of organization item number 1 is to consider a resolution that will approve LAFCO application 22-08 for annexation of a 5.83 acre property located at the southwest corner of Highway 101 and Clark Avenue intersection, portion of Key Site 2, Assessor's Tract Map 14824 to the North County Lighting District and County Service Area 5.
Mr. Prater, is this you?
This is me. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we will be considering this annexation reorganization into both the CSA 5 and North County Lighting. This application was actually submitted by the property owners by petition, which is not usual for CSA 5 and North County Lighting. Generally, our office sees these applications come through the Board of Supervisors as representatives of those dependent districts. However, the property owner was eager to move the process forward and was able to apply through the petition process. Again, located at the southwest corner of Highway 101 and Clark Avenue, 5.83 acre parcel. The services to be provided by CSA 5 and North County Lighting are the lighting and open space maintenance services. The county processed a commercial center development plan that allowed a split into 4 parcels to create a neighborhood commercial development. And so as a condition of that approval, they were required to annex into these 2 districts. The area was already within both of the agencies' spheres of influence, so no need to amend there. Here's an overview of these large districts here. As you see, North County Lighting, essentially we're way up here in this corner of the particular parcel, 5.83 acres. You can see all in yellow is the larger, broader North County Lighting District that it consumes all the way over to Guadalupe, down to Los Alamos, all the way down to Mission Hills and Vandenberg Village. CSA 5 as well is a much larger parcels, but as we zoom in to show you this parcel, we're looking at essentially this finger here that came out and was subdivided to create those 4 lots. All of this territory in this general area is within the sphere of influence of both these districts. Again, the county approved a commercial development proposal. So in this case, no land use is being changed as a result of the annexation. They're just following through with the approval that was already laid out. The environmental review was conducted by the county. They prepared an addendum to the original Orcutt Community Plan EIR that addressed this commercial center and their impacts. And essentially, through that addendum, the county did not identify any additional substantial changes that would create any new significant impacts that weren't already disclosed. And that is included in attachment D of this packet. With this annexation, we both have consent by the landowner through their application and letter acknowledging consent, and both consent by the district representatives, in this case, the managers of those two districts, with a caveat that we'll discuss here, which is the terms and conditions. So as part of the report back process, County Public Works, on behalf of CSA 5 and North County Lighting, requested that in traditional form and fashion, when properties are annexed into these districts, that a zone of benefit gets created. And they need to initiate that through a formal process, which has to go through the County Board of Supervisors to initiate, and then ultimately through a creation of that zone of benefit, and then ultimately a vote by the landowner, in this case, the developer of the property, to establish that zone of benefit. And because that still takes time to process after this commission's decision on whether to annex the territory, staff has conditioned that that benefit assessment be achieved within a 2-year time frame, with the ability to extend for good cause if they were not able to achieve the establishment of that zone. So with that, the conclusion is that the area is located in an area that's best served as the only primary street lighting and open space maintenance districts. That's a reasonable, logical extension of those boundaries as they're adjacent to existing service areas, and that it'd be subject to this 2-year vote approval for a benefit assessment district. So with that, we will conclude our presentation and be available for any questions.
And do any commissioners have questions?
I have one or two.
Commissioner Stark, of course.
Yes, if I might. Am I correct that EIR number 95 EIR 01 is the EIR for the Orcutt Community Plan that was done in 1995? Is that right?
Correct. 97, I believe, is when it was finally adopted.
And it started in 95. And this project has been fully approved, has it not, in the 2019? So we have an approved commercial shopping center consistent with the original approved use in the Orcutt Community Plan.
Correct.
And this is to provide basically lighting and other ancillary services to that shopping center when it gets built.
When it gets built. Yep.
Thanks. I remember that community plan.
And Commissioner Nelson, just checking in with you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hartman. With Commissioner Williams in the room, I won't be voting, but I am supportive of this. The North County Line District is a very fiscally responsible district that provides the lighting in the North County, and it's only appropriate that this property be joining that, as well as CSA 5, which provides our park and open spaces. So I am encouraged that the property owner went through and proactively got this done. I know it was one of the conditions of approval, and I think they're just trying to get ahead of things so that it doesn't take them any longer than necessary to get the shopping center up and going and operational and being a community benefit for the community of Orcutt and the entire county. So thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Any public comment?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, I have no request to speak on this item.
All right, then may I have a motion to approve A through E in our staff recommendation?
Well, I'll move to approve it with the conditions as requested by the Public Works Department, outlined by our EO, as identified in the staff report.
I'll second it.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark, Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, now to business item number 1.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to consider recommendations regarding the final budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 and to consider adoption of a resolution.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll switch PowerPoints briefly here. This is fairly straightforward final budget as it reflects the same proposed budget that we adopted and moved forward. As we always start off and remind ourselves, this commission is an independent body and must adopt its own budget that covers its roles and duties and responsibilities and objectives that you outlined through your adoption of your work plan. The Government Code 56381 requires, after the commission holds a public hearing, to move that proposed budget to all of the member agencies, the county, the city, and the special independent districts for their input and evaluation. So you adopted that in April 6th. We forwarded that proposed budget to everybody. And now we are back for the final budget that has to be adopted per CKH by June 15th. So we're ahead of schedule. With that, as mentioned in our proposed budget, the overall budget is $571,236, which represents about a 7% decrease from our prior budget. Listing the reasons for that are identical with staffing needs, eliminating the contract for contractual services for clerking services, the reduction in the general fund cost account allocation plan, and no need for additional contributions to our contingency reserve at this time. Here is a side-by-side comparison budget reminder of what last year's budget looked like versus what this year's budget looks like. Slight increase in salaries and benefits overall with the rise in that cost, but all other line items are a decrease across the board. So roughly $45,000 less this year than last year. As part of your attachment A is the full spreadsheet of all of the line items that we've expressed. Here it is up on the overhead in case anybody viewing it doesn't have it in front of them. But if you have any questions specifically about any specific line item, I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. So with that, we are recommending that you review this final budget, you accept all the public testimony, and you adopt this final budget as presented. And then you would also direct us to send this to the county auditor's office so that they can develop the proportionment allocation for each of the county, city, and special districts. So if that, there are any questions about the budget, I'd be happy to answer any.
Any questions? This is our second look at this. I don't see any lights. Madam Clerk, anybody online or in Santa Maria?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, I have no request to speak on this item.
Do we have any public comment on this?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we do not have any public comment on this item.
Commissioner Kiriakou?
I'll move A through C.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second by Commissioner Guyer. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Madam Clerk, turning to the next business item number 2. Would you read that into the record, please?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, business item number 2 is to consider the adoption of a municipal service and sphere of influence review for the 33 agencies that provide water, wastewater, recycled water, and stormwater services in Santa Barbara County.
Making our clerk do a lot of back and forth. She has a PowerPoint for this as well.
But you'll be presenting, right, Mr. Prater?
I will be presenting this item. The item we're all here waiting for, right?
It is a hefty item.
It is. Can I just use my persuasive powers and say these are not the MSRs you're looking for on this May 4th day? Okay, the MSR adoption for the water, wastewater, stormwater. As you know, this was initially kicked off back in February of 2022 when we started to compile, send out the surveys, compile the data. We've held a number of status update meetings as we went through the process so that we can inform the public of whether we were on track or not and solicit any direction, input from the commission as we were conducting the service review itself. We ultimately conducted an administrative review that sent to all of the agencies. They provided input and feedback to all of that, and then ultimately released it for public review back in late February and March. Held a release meeting that disclosed the document that was online and published, in which time the commission directed an extended review period for comment period until May of 4th. So it was date-specific noticed. We did receive a number of comments, as you see in the packet. There were 56 comments noted. We received some additional comments most recently, an additional 3 or 4 comments that have been provided outside of that was forwarded to the commission for their review. We'll get into the specifics of all of that. Here's the overview map of the 33 agencies that were involved. This is found early on in the service review document itself that identifies the boundaries of each of these agencies, and ultimately a recommendation on amending only 8 spheres of influence for 8 of the agencies at the end of this conclusion of this report. And so with that, you'll see that there are 15 agencies that are evaluated that essentially had what we term as coterminous spheres of influence, meaning their boundaries did not go beyond their service area. And so they're not recommending to be changed to any extent greater than that, except for one, which is Summerlin Sanitation District. In addition, the 8 cities, 5 of those cities actually have spheres that extend beyond their service city limit line. 3 of them are coterminous with their city limit boundary. Ultimately, none of the cities are being recommended for an adoption until we complete all 5 service reviews so that the commission has full information on all service levels, and then we will bring back a final update to all of the 8 cities' spheres of influence. And then the remainder balance of that are 10 agencies which did have additional spheres, some small, some large, in various degrees of the total 33 that were evaluated. And again, a total of 8 of those agencies are being recommended to have their spheres changed in some way or fashion as part of this process. As far as public outreach and input, again, we held regular agendized meetings and updates for the commission so that they can give some direction about whether or not we were meeting the expectations and whether and at what point can we make sure that we wrap this particular service review up given the bulk and size of it and the outline that we presented itself. The document itself has been posted on our website since February. And again, all of the agencies, the county, and our offices all had that document available for anybody that wanted to review it and make comment. Now to the meat of what the ultimate changes resulted out of this report. And so attachment D includes those comments and a change table that lists all of staff's recommended changes or recommendations to not change the particular comment that was made by the presenter in the document. As a result, several changes were made and recommended by staff. Some of those were not recommended. Of particular note, the commission gave direction to have the Carpinteria Sanitation District come back and present to your board what kind of boundary they felt they wanted to have as far as the sphere of influence boundary. After that March meeting, both the general manager and myself have met and convened and tried to discuss what kind of boundary would result that met their needs, that met our policies. At the end of the day, we could not come to an agreement on what that boundary looked like. And so we've presented staff's option, and we presented the district's option of what they'd like to see. And so you'll see that as option 2 and option 1 within Exhibit A of the packet. And there's a number of reasons why we couldn't come to that, largely pertain to our existing policies that are on the books about serving utility services within ag parcels. So we have a set of policies that kind of restrain some of those decision-making that would have to be reconsidered if we wanted to do that. And then secondly, it was a very large area that the district was asking to include, and our CEQA analysis really didn't cover that. We were relying heavily on an exemption status, and so we felt if that large area was to be included, more CEQA review needed to be done. At the end of the day, we're going to let the district manager speak on behalf of the district to inform the commission. If after all of that testimony, the commission still feels the need that it's valid to reconsider that, the recommendation is that you adopt staff's exhibit at this hearing, allow an extension of review, and we can do a supplemental service review for the sanitation district. They can go back, work on that, take the lead on that analysis, do the lead on CEQA review, and then we can bring all of that back to the commission for a future consideration if that's what the commission desire is. And so that sort of concludes our presentation in totality of the bulk of that. Obviously, there's a lot of comments that were made. If there's any specific comments about those, staff will be happy to answer any of those. But the highlight of what I want to say is that of the 33 agencies that we reviewed, this was a tremendous amount of work, and it could not be possible without our direct relationship with those agencies, their staff, their input, and involvement. And so we thank them many times over. We're eager to get this particular MSR wrapped up and done with, because we're eager to start the next one as we are moving through our process. So with that, we turn it over to the commission. Here's the map of the proposal that the district wanted to have. As you can see in the northern portion, they would like to see more of the sphere expanded. That includes some of the ag and residential properties on their northern border all the way to the Highway 192. I'll let you get a look at that. And then here is staff's proposed recommended boundary. So we exclude that agricultural residential area, but we do include the areas that were recommended for a couple of residential pods and Beach Club Drive as well. So with that, that concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any.
Do any commissioners have questions before we go to public comment? Commissioner Starr?
I have a couple of questions, one of which relates to the general accuracy of the information in the, not the sphere report, but the municipal service review report. I noticed there's a bunch of different comments, including one with reference to the Los Olivos Community Services District, which I think challenges the accuracy of the description in the MSR report. Can you comment that and resolve it? That's my first question.
Yeah, so those comments letters came in most recently within the last day, so staff was not able to include that into our table of changes and provide detailed analysis about whether the change should occur or not. But the global sense of what I would say about the service review is, yes, we try to make the most accurate information available to us, with the caveat that what we do in evaluating these service reviews is we're looking back at a moment in time, and it's a snapshot in time that we try to gather that information. And so it will not necessarily have the most up-to-date information as of yesterday, because that's not the purpose of the service review. The general purpose of a service review is to give the commission a broad sense of the agencies, what they do, what kind of services they provide, their capabilities to provide service, their financial stability or not, and their general governance structure and what challenges they may have. I think on balance, this report as a service review does that. I think it gives the commission a fair sense of all of the 33 agencies and what they're doing. And now what is being asked of you is to adopt that as general information of knowledge so that you can make an informed decision about where their sphere of influence should be.
Thank you. That answers part of it. Would you disagree with his statement that if we're putting out information for public consumption, that to the extent that we reasonably can, we want it as accurate as possible?
I would agree. We would want to make it as accurate as possible.
Thank you. I've got two more questions, one of which is really simple. The next question has to do with disadvantaged unincorporated communities, or ducks. They're not birds, but they're communities, I think all of them in the unincorporated county. Could you, I guess, comfort me with information regarding whether any of the disadvantaged unincorporated communities are in any financial trouble, or whether there's any serious infrastructure problems in any of those? I guess most of them, with the exception of Isla Vista, are fairly remote rural communities that you've identified as ducks, but Isla Vista, I think, is also included. I just want to know if there's any things that we have to be particularly sensitive to or worried about in terms of financial stability or danger of infrastructure failure in any of those areas.
Okay, that's a mouthful. I'll do my best to answer that question in this way. Yes, we have identified a number of disadvantaged unincorporated communities. What the statute asks of LAFCO in identifying these is to identify whether or not these disadvantaged communities reside within a sphere of influence of a district or city. And if they do, make note of that so that if some future annexation were to occur that was adjacent to this disadvantaged unincorporated community, that the application involve that community so that they're not excluded as far as future service needs. And so that's the main gist of what the Act is asking us to do. To that extent, those disadvantaged unincorporated communities do not exist within the spheres of influence that we've identified or that we're adjusting to. As you noted, the one exception in somewhat urban area is Isla Vista. That has been identified. Isla Vista is within a service district for sanitation and water services, right? So they already get provided those services. So they're not lacking a service that they would need to get annexed into. They're already part of an agency that provides those primary services. And the primary services are water, wastewater, and fire service. And so Isla Vista is served for those services. So albeit they are identified as a disadvantaged community, they're not lacking services. And so they would not be needing to be annexed into a service district for that purpose. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Guyer?
Hopefully I can frame this question correctly. One of the questions that came up on comments from Los Olivos Community Service District, one of the components of the MSR is to analyze the
financial ability of the district to be able to provide services. Would I assume correctly that it's difficult for you to do that because the bond measure hasn't actually the project hasn't actually been identified and the bond measure hasn't been there. So that's the reason for the lack of comment for it in the MSR?
That is absolutely correct. So they have not passed their Prop 218 and gotten their full funding allocation. So we're not quite sure what they can and can't fund based on that. So what we did was provide the analysis of the financials that we were aware of as a piece of information for the commission to make a decision. And that played into some of the recommendation. As you know, there are a number of communities in the Santa Ynez Valley that are on septic systems that are in a special problems area that we'd like to see move to a public sewer system. But because Los Olivos CSD hasn't really got itself up and operating and fully funded yet, our recommendation was to maintain their sphere to be coterminous with their boundary. That made the most logical sense for us to make that recommendation. So not until maybe the next 5 years when we evaluate water wastewater service again can we truly look at that financial piece of the puzzle.
Thank you, because I hope that provides some clarity to the public for it.
Commissioner Williams?
So in the case of the boundaries proposed for the sphere of influence for Carpinteria Sanitary District, can you make sure I understand what the criteria between the parcels that were included in the suggested map and those that were in Carpinteria Sanitary District's map but not in your suggested map? What's the difference between those parcels?
If you allow me to move over to the computer, I have a PowerPoint of the policies that are at question here. So, Commissioner Williams, to the chair, these three policies are the policies revolving around extended urban utility services to ag parcels, essentially. Those are the policies that this commission adopted back in 2009. And largely what they say is that the commission's goal is to protect and preserve agricultural by avoiding extending potable water and wastewater services to agriculturally zoned properties. And the way in which you look at that is if bullet number 2 basically says if you were to at all consider it, you would consider approving on a very limited basis, narrowly defining the portion that needs the service. So you wouldn't include all of the parcel, you would just include the facility that needs that service. So those are the policies that are on the books at play that we would need to probably reevaluate in making that decision.
Well, I think there's a particular policy issue that sort of throws a monkey wrench into what is required to preserve agriculture. And that is that the Regional Water Quality Control Board's mandates for greenhouse operations, whether they're doing blueberries or flowers or marijuana, requires no discharge, zero. Not a drop of water is supposed to escape that site. And so if you do not have sanitary district hookup, then you have to take your brine and you have to truck it to somewhere that takes the brine. And that's not only is that just bad policy, from a perspective of traffic and preserving our roads, it's an impediment to the survival of agriculture. And so my point is that we now have a policy issue that makes sanitary service sort of vital to the continuation of agriculture in the Carpinteria Valley. Because if you're not doing greenhouses, you're just not going to be able to produce enough whatever you want to produce to survive. So how does that factor into your calculus?
Yeah, I think I understand that the commission could consider policies that don't narrowly define the particular use, but gets more at the continued agricultural production. So you can annex or you can provide services to a agricultural property so long as that property continues to maintain its agricultural productivity. I think that's the policy direction that the commission may want to head in that gets at that point.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that there was parcels in the difference between those map that are ag parcels that I know want to continue doing ag operations. And so I guess I don't know how passionate I am about this, sort of dependent on the second question is, does whether you're in the sphere of influence whether you recommend a parcel for an out-of-area service agreement? Because essentially, they need to get the sanitary service, they would need an out-of-area service agreement. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, as we saw in our out-of-area service agreement today, it's a two-part test. Either you're a public health and safety or you're in the sphere of influence, right? So if these parcels are not in the sphere of influence, they'd have to have threat to health and safety cause, right? So if the goal is to allow that kind of service to occur, the boundary would need to be included into the sphere of influence. And I think the difference in the parcel makeup from staffs and the districts is the district included broadly all some residential, largely agricultural, some were vacant, some had ag production, large of them had ag production. And I'm not sure that we necessarily had a large disagreement in that process. I think it came down to we're trying to adhere to this policy that got implemented in 2009, and we came to some conflict with that. So I see if the commission would like to address the policy issue that broadly allows continuation of agricultural productivity, we can get back at a more refined map that addresses the ag parcels that are going to continue.
So I guess along the lines of what you're saying, I would hope that today we would direct you to include the parcels that have, that are ag parcels, have greenhouse infrastructure, and so there's really no reason why they would be converting. It's fine if you don't want to include some of the residential parcels. I get that, but it seems to me that the ag parcels that sort of have a stake, and I saw a number of those on the map differences along Foothill that seemed to me, an issue. Not everybody complains about this. Apparently, some people must be able to find some places to take brine, but I don't want large trucks running through, the Carpinteria Valley delivering brine to Kingdom Come when it's much better policy to be handled by the local sanitary district.
Madam Clerk, before we go to Commissioner Stark, are there any commissioners online or in Santa Maria who would like to comment?
Chair Hartman and members of Commissioner Nelson, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Prater. You mentioned about the cities and the sphere of influences, and that's not what's being discussed here, that those are going to be done through a separate process.
That is correct.
Okay. Can you help me? So that's not on the table today.
Yeah, we are not anticipating adopting any sphere changes one way or the other for all 8 cities at this point.
But is there a process that we're going to begin going through at LAFCO to evaluate those?
Yeah, so through this MSR study, we have 5 basic reviews of services. We did fire and police. We're now trying to wrap up water, wastewater. We're into transportation and launched that already. We'll cover parks and open space and library services, and then we have a catch-all. So by the time we get done with the 5th one, we will be sitting down and looking at the cities and looking back at this information as more recent information for the commission to consider about where is the appropriate boundaries for those 8 cities.
Okay, so
through
what is the
through the research, through the service review process, we are looking at what makes the most logical sense as far as the service capability and financial feasibility of the cities. We're just not looking at their sphere and drawing a line at this time.
Does the board or the commission have that discretion through municipal service reviews to do that? Anyone along any of these reviews that come to us?
I will answer it hopefully this way, and it makes sense. The commission has the authority to adopt any sphere of influence for any agency that it wishes by meeting essentially a 4-step test. One is you direct staff to prepare a 21-day notice. You allow you feel informed enough to be able to draw a boundary around that district or a city. We have adequate CEQA that addresses the decision that you want to make, and you adopt a resolution that includes the exhibit. So you do those 4 things at any point in time. The commission can direct a change to any agency's boundary. The act calls for the service review to be conducted as a piece of information, as an informational piece for the commission's desire to be able to be more informed about where you want to draw that boundary line. I'll go back a little bit in history. This commission at Santa Barbara, prior to my arrival, often just reconsidered everybody's sphere without a tremendous amount of information. But you felt comfortable, you knew the lay of the land, and that the boundaries that you were drawing met the needs of those communities and those districts and agencies. And so you were able to do that. You essentially noticed it for 21 days. You had an agendized item that allowed you to take the action, and you adopted a resolution, and you had an adequate CEQA. So you do those 4 things, at any point in time, you can adjust anybody's boundary.
And that's to grow it or to reduce it?
Grow it, reduce it, whatever is at the pleasure of the majority of the commission, right? What this commission has done since 2001 was we embarked on what we wanted to see as a municipal service review program. And so we developed these 5 main themes of services to evaluate. You wanted to understand more about these types of service components before you made any real decisions about spheres of influence for any of the agencies. And the caveat is that as we wrapped up the service review for an agency that only provided that type of service, you would then adopt the sphere because you've had the information base that you felt comfortable with, which is why there are a handful that are not being adopted as a result of the completion of the water wastewater. It's because there's some minor miscellaneous services that got add-oned to another chapter of services for streets, for recreation and parks, things of that nature that we haven't conducted yet. So that's the fundamental program and work plan that the commission has directed. I bring that back every year to be evaluated, and we bring back the launch of each of those service review plans, a schedule, an outline, and we ask the commission as a majority vote, is this what you want to do? Do you still want to continue this program? Do you want to deviate from the program? Do you like this schedule? Do you like this outline? Do you want to change it? Do you want to evaluate something else? And we get that feedback, and that sets staff onto the direction of the program.
Thank you, Mr. Prater. And my last question is about the disadvantaged unincorporated communities that Commissioner Stark had mentioned. Those are identified through county planning. Is that how that they are identified for LAFCO's purposes?
The urban, repeat that, the urban what?
Or the disadvantaged unincorporated communities?
No,
the ducks?
they are not identified through county planning. They're evaluated through our chapter on that looks at roughly 5 or 6 different components that have to deal with state DAC mapping tool, analysis tools, environmental justice screening. It does look at counties' application on disadvantaged community grant application. So there's a number of things that look at that help establish whether or not it's identified as a disadvantaged community.
Okay, and so just one last piece of feedback, and I'm actually curious if Chair Hartman might agree as well, is that I believe we have Casmelia, Sisquoc, Gary on there, we have Isla Vista, and some, I'm trying to think, in Los Alamos as the disadvantaged unincorporated communities. I'm just thinking through that. It makes sense that the community of Tanglewood might also be something that should be considered moving forward. That hasn't been reviewed by LAFCO staff. I think it's something that's worth at least doing some analyzing to see if that's an appropriate location to make those types of determinations in the future.
Staff will note that.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Allen, did you have any comments?
I do have a comment. I would like to support the comments submitted by the San Ynez River Water Conservation District via email today. I agree with the district's conclusion that the comments by the agency for which the section pertains should take precedence over other public comments since they are more familiar with the topic specifics. Allowing other entities to change edits provided by the agency is negating their authority to define their agency. Thank you.
Thank you. That is helpful. Commissioner Stark.
Yeah, I just wanted, as a fairly simple question, I think it has 2 parts. One is, can you identify the CEQA deficiency that you found with respect to the treatment of the Carpinteria Sanitary District? I thought you said you thought that the CEQA, I'd like to know how.
Yeah, so the CEQA exemptions that we are relying on have to do with smaller pre-developed parcels that have very little or no change or no significant development being proposed at the time of our acknowledgement. And so we're using those classes, class 19, class 20, class 3, as the analysis. We have not done that analysis for this larger boundary that was proposed. I suspect my CEQA experience is that given the size of some of those parcels and the underlying potential, that an exemption would not qualify across the board. There may be some within there that you could find, but the conversation that I had with the general manager was generally he did not want to cherry pick through the parcels. He would prefer to have a holistic approach to their boundary if they were going to adjust it, because that gave them the essence of what they were trying to achieve in moving forward with their recycled project.
Thank you. Now, the second part of my question is, do I understand your recommendation correctly is to pass this back to the sanitary district and have them come in with some revised, I guess it would be an amendment or some procedure whereby the district would assume lead responsibility, agency responsibility under CEQA, and would I infer from that that the various issues that Commissioner Williams raised about the necessity of providing some escape of the brine, which I understand is effluent, right? It's not salt water that you get from the ocean. It's what you're disposing in sanitary disposal. the environmental effects of being required to truck that off-site and things like that, would that be picked up when that comes back, or if that comes back? Seems like a serious issue. to
Yeah,
me.
so through the chair, the short answer is that is not my recommendation. My recommendation is to solely adopt staff's boundary. However, I'm not opposed to that recommendation if the commission sees that as a viable option.
And if I might follow up, if we did carve out Carpinteria, it's not just a CEQA issue, we would have to look at our policies.
Correct. So it's sort of a package deal, I think. There'd be direction to staff. Basically, the recommendation is that you adopt the service review for all 33 agencies. You amend the spheres as recommended by staff. And then on a separate note, you can give some direction about allowing Carpinteria Sanitation District come back and supplement the service review and sphere boundary analysis, including CEQA components, that entails all of the issues that have been raised. And then we would come back at some future date when all that has been ironed out and staff feels comfortable with the analysis. And we would come back for an amended service review supplement approval with a new resolution for a new boundary.
Mr. Dillon, did you have something to add? Oh, okay, we're gonna, but I think it gives the public a better opportunity to understand what they are so they can direct their comments to our decision. Commissioner Freeman.
I have a question about our authority. That's something that I apparently misunderstand and from previous meetings have misunderstood in different directions. So I believe I heard you say, and I'm directing this at Mr. Prater, that we might have the ability to allow a district to have an area inside of its sphere of influence, maybe even potentially later be annexed, with some kind of proviso that allows it to only be the case if it were to be continued to be used for ag purposes. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Through the chair, Commissioner Freeman, so the analysis that I was giving was the current policies, as I put on the overhead, did not allow for that. Specifically, the policies where you would only allow for a smaller subset of that parcel to be added.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean our policy. I meant like
Yeah.
that LAFCO theoretically has the authority with some set of policies to do such a thing where...
Yeah, if that policy were not to be so specific, and the policy was more driven to say properties could be given service as long as agricultural was being maintained, then that's your policy, right?
I feel like I'd asked this a very similar question, probably with a critical difference. That means the answer is very different at a previous meeting, and the answer I'd gotten was that we do not have land use authority, and that we would be unable to provide any kind of requirement going forward on the usage of the property after we allow a city or a district to take it.
That is true. You do not have land use authority.
But I don't understand. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry to confuse you on that. So you cannot dictate the land use of the property, but what you can say is that the preference is that this is the reason why you're going to allow this extension of service is it's already zoned ag, it already has ag uses, and it will be maintained. You're not telling an agency that you will zone this ag and maintain this as ag. It already exists. And you're saying because of that scenario, you would allow this extension of service.
Okay, thank you for that.
It's a fine point.
Thank you for that clarification. It's a continuation of an expectation that the commission might have as far as what might happen based upon the history of the property, but not necessarily having any control over in the future. Okay, and then, yeah, I think that's my only question. I've got comments later, but yeah.
Commissioner Guyer?
Just for clarification, when you refer to LAFCO as policy, is it a LAFCO in general, or is it a local LAFCO policy?
That was a local LAFCO policy adopted in 2009.
Commissioner Kiriakou?
I have a question about the difference between the proposed CARP sanitary map versus the staff proposed sanitary map. How do those two maps line up or not line up with the Carpinteria Water District sphere of influence?
It's a good question.
I try not to waste them.
I do not know that off the top of my head. I know Carpinteria Valley Water is a much bigger boundary that it serves. So I don't know the finite detail. I would suspect that the request of the district would fall within the water district.
Okay, thank you.
We might hear that in public comment, an answer to that question.
Yeah, I told Director Kiriakou that my understanding is that most of the areas in question are in the water district. The only ones I was uncertain about is the ones on the very western and northern edges of the map. But maybe the sanitary district's director could
Madam
clarify.
Clerk, public comment.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, first I would like to remind those participants on Zoom, if you would like to speak under this item, please use the raise hand feature. And we will begin in Santa Barbara with Mr. Craig Murray.
And just how many public comments do we have, just so I know?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, it does not appear that we have any request to speak at this moment on Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Craig Murray. I'm the general manager of the Carpinteria Sanitary District. And I was indeed here in March. I provided some input on this item, and I'll try not to be overly repetitive, but there's a few kind of points I want to restate and some clarification that I'd like to make. And then I'll be happy to answer questions. I can first knock off the water district question. There are probably some parcels on the western end that are in Montecito Water District, but the bulk of those properties are in Carpinteria Valley Water District's boundary. And there is a map in your packet or your staff report that shows their boundary. So I'll first say that our understanding of what a sphere of influence is, it's the boundary that's intended to delineate the future service area of an agency like mine. And it has a couple purposes. One is we view it as a planning tool where we can do long-range planning for capital infrastructure, for financial considerations that contemplate future new customers. But it also allows those potential future customers that might be peripheral to our area to know, can I possibly get sewer service or not? And I think those are just two important points to make. This, I think, is the fourth municipal service review where we've come to the commission and basically made the same comment. We've suggested that there are properties that are peripheral to our boundary, peripheral to our sphere, that will likely require future sewer service. And over that 2 decades, that's played out. I've been here a dozen times or more, 24 times, dealing with annexation proposals for properties that we certainly could have expected to be requiring sewer service and included in a sphere long ago. In 2012, we went as far at the request of LAFCO staff of making an actual proposal to amend our sphere. We drew a boundary. It was orderly in that it basically followed highways and looked very different than the boundary we have now, which Mr. Prater, if you could you put that up, our boundary? Oh, thank you. And that didn't even get consideration up to the commission. It just sort of died on the vine, which is okay. But in all that time, really the issue that has been at question or potentially in conflict with policy is the ag parcel issue. And Commissioner Geyer and maybe Mr. Dillon can attest to the fact that when those policies were adopted, we were here saying, wait a minute, there's some differentiation between what is prime ag land and what is industrialized agriculture in Carpinteria. These are greenhouses, they have a lot of employees, they need sanitation, maybe they need to dispose of wastewater from water treatment operations like that. They're just slightly different, and maybe in your policy you should contemplate whether or not greenhouses, industrialized agriculture, needs sewer service or not. And over those 2 decades, we've continually had requests from operators and owners, hey, we have this problem. The regional board's coming and telling us we can't, rebuild our septic tank. Can we get sewer service? And we've had to say, we've gone through the process up to LAFCO, up to the County Board of Supervisors, trying to see if we can reconcile this dilemma, and we still have been unable to. And so we'd like to kind of quit spinning our wheels and figure out, is this going to happen or not? Is there, momentum for this to happen now or not? So when we went back after March, Mr. Prayton and I started looking at the maps, and we looked at what we submitted in 2012. That a boundary kind of followed Highway 192 there for a new sphere. It was pretty clear that wasn't going to be supported by staff. And I understand there's parcels in there in that territory that are still orchards, open field agriculture, probably not going to be supported or consistent with the policy. So the map that we created, I just took a Google map, looked at all those parcels that had greenhouses on them, and highlighted them. And that became what is being presented as our proposal, Carpinteria Sanitary District's proposal. I couldn't come up with a better way to do it. We could have, as was suggested, cherry-picked certain parcels that have been, before us before saying we need service. But then what happens with the parcel that's next door to it? That, once these guys have a sewer line next to them, well, this is a good solution for us. And so that was the best we could do. I'm not by any means saying it's perfect, but that's the boundary that you see as our proposal. It's just, from an image, picking those greenhouse parcels. I want to go back and just make a comment on the sphere of influence and the applicability of CEQA. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CEQA expert, but something has always been in my mind that changing a sphere boundary is not a project under CEQA. It's not until you get to the annexation or the development proposal that you fall under CEQA for review requirements. And that's a question. I don't know the answer to that, but that was my assumption up to this point. I don't think that, if the staff selection or staff suggestion is recommended here, that it is really in our interest to use our ratepayer money to go back and figure out how we can, do a CEQA study and do another proposal to change our sphere to bring in future customers. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It works better when, the applicant can come and fund those things and not our existing ratepayers. So we'll probably look to what LAFCO is stating by adopting that. Like, we don't ever intend for these parcels to be part of Carpinteria Sanitary District, and that'll be our position going forward. So, lastly, the recycled water project in Carpinteria is going forward, and as we talked about at our meeting in March, this is potentially a source of supply for Carpinterians. Right now, the water's going into the contaminated shallow groundwater basin through septic systems. We could recover that, beneficially reuse it, and add to the portfolio for Carpinteria. So.
And what does that mean to the economics of your project?
Well, again, there's no time frame for annexation. We don't know who would connect, when, and how much, but it would allow us to add some increment of future capacity. We'd maybe add a few more slots in the rack for the reverse osmosis, that kind of thing.
Any other questions? Commissioner Williams?
Well, I guess is a question both of the director and Craig. Essentially, I'm thinking of making a motion to adopt the service review, make the boundary changes, but to have our staff add back in those parcels that the sanitary district has proposed that have either current or past greenhouse infrastructure on them. That would be one option, or just to adopt Carpinteria Sanitary District's map. What would staff's preference be out of those two?
And if I might jump in, I think we need to change our policies before we can do that, or we'd be inconsistent. I'm sorry, I may have stolen your thunder, but I'd be very uncomfortable voting as is.
Exactly. I would add for staff to come back with those policy changes. The preference from my standpoint was just take this map.
Yeah,
Take the
and
districts
I would just argue that we do not have to radically change our policies, because if we are facilitating a sphere of influence in order to facilitate a out-of-service agreement that preserves viability of agriculture, then I mean, isn't that the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish? I mean, it really boils down to this problem that's I think is a sort of cultural problem in our county of, well, what do you mean by agriculture? Is agriculture a field that nobody can afford to farm? That's a vacant lot. That's not agriculture. Agriculture is a place where people farm, right? And so if our policies preserve vacant lots, that's very different than our parcels preserving agriculture. Viable, economically viable agriculture, which is the whole point of why some of these areas need the out-of-service agreements.
Commissioner Stark and then Commissioner Guyer.
Yeah, it seems to me that the essence of what Commissioner Williams says is correct, that where we're preserving agriculture and the intent that necessary urban utilities might be provided, probably be a lot cleaner if we said it in their policy, because our policies, the language, my understanding of the way that's written is that it's allowed like tiny little exception that makes room for necessary farm worker housing. I think that was the idea, to allow, but it doesn't really reach the policy point that the Commissioner Williams is making of the various things that he supports. I'd support coming back with a policy amendment to do that, and then identifying the parcels where the utility services are necessary to preserve agriculture is a much easier lift, I think.
Commissioner Guyer.
Yeah, I agree that at some point we should review that policy for changes. I mean, it definitely needs some clarification to it, because as I heard Craig Murray talk, the first thing that comes in my mind is something that has greenhouses on it. Is that the same zoning for ag that an orchard produces? Is it the same type of zoning for it, or can there be a delineation there? But which is something I don't feel LAFCO should be involved with, zoning aspects of it. But definitely, it sounds to me like we definitely need to look at that policy and tweak it.
And if I might jump in, I'm not sure the industrial agriculture gets the distinction that we want to make. There is a lot of conventional agriculture in North County that is machinery heavy. Maybe it's greenhouse production or something. I mean, I think in terms of the precedent that we're setting for other agricultural lands, it's really important that we have a policy that carves out the greenhouses and carpinteria as something different, and that's why we want to have extension of sewer to them, and I support that. Commissioner Freeman.
I would also be very interested in reconsidering these policies. Well, one thing that's made me uncomfortable at times is the restriction or the lack of allowance of certain kinds of urban services to areas that would allow for greater environmental protection over time, able to do wastewater recycling and to connect to the water programs, all sorts of great things that we aren't doing because ostensibly we're trying to protect the environment, but we're trying to protect the environment in both of these cases, and so it just feels very unfortunate. And we do have, as LAFCO, right, that balance of trying to protect ag land and trying to provide efficient urban services. And if we can provide urban services to ag land in order to make everything better, that seems like it would be like right down our alley. So-
Right, I agree, but there are measures in Buellton and Goleta that try to preserve ag land by preventing extension of water and sewer to those areas. So we need to make the distinction is all that I'm trying to say. So, Mr.
Chair.
Dillon.
Madam Chair, first of all, let me say I completely support the commission revisiting your policies before you go in a different direction, and that's certainly doable. Secondly, one of my main comments about this packet, when I saw how many agencies were involved and how many spheres were being amended, my main comment was CEQA. And Mr. Prater and I spent some time talking about whether all this fit within an exemption. And what's proposed in option 1 is fine. I mean, Mr. Prater spent some time on that. We talked about it. We looked at the case law. There is case law that can kick it into CEQA. So it's not a flat-out safe area to just say, oh, it's just a sphere of influence amendment, because there's case law that says if it's done with an anticipation of a land use in order to facilitate a land use change, then it's subject to CEQA. But if there's no possibility of change, then it's not subject to CEQA. So I'd recommend that you not adopt the district's proposed boundary change today. I think Mr. Prater would like to see you adopt option 1, but on option 2, you could refer it back to Mr. Prater to develop the analysis and the CEQA determination. And also the other thing I'd like to note, the one time I was in a meeting on this project that I recall, planning and development was in the room, the county was in the room, and they were a main driver of the view of how this valley should be handled. So while I agree with I think the comments being offered are very logical and supportive of environmental protection. I think LAFCO might want to hear from planning and development to see if their position is softened over time as apparently some of the supervisors. So.
Okay, so I think, let's see, can you put up option 1 or option 2? I mean, I think we want to move forward with adopting the MSR.
Option 2 is on the screen right now. It's the broader, and in it.
I'm looking forward in words, so we capture our motion correctly.
I could give it a try, Madam Chair.
I think, but we want to adopt the MSR with carving out Carpinteria and change the spheres except Carpinteria and move forward further with study and.
Just a slight modification. Mr. Prater would like to see option 1 adopted today. It picks up some changes he's agreed with Mr. Murray. And then he's not against option 2, but we want to look harder at the CEQA analysis required, and also, quite frankly, check with county P&D to see where they stand. If we're going to disagree with him, we are, but we need to check that box. And I know in the meeting I did go to, Regional Water, to my surprise, showed up at the meeting and proposed support for along the lines of what Mr. Murray is talking about. So that was notable.
Yeah. Commissioner Guyer.
I guess this is a question to Mike or council. If we adopt anything other, let's see, if we make an adoption that hasn't been publicly noticed, do we have to do a new public notice?
Well, I kind of analogize the answer to that as an analogy to when you do an annexation. The law is clear that LAFCO is not bound by the boundaries of the proposal. LAFCO can't change the boundaries when you approve the final annexation. I think normally that's an adjustment to reduce the boundaries, so it may or may not give us protection on an expansion of the boundaries. But I think the cleaner thing is, again, to come back. Mr. Prater and I just discussed the notice required to expand the boundaries to what the district proposes. The 21-day notice is very easily accomplished. We email it into the newspaper and they publish it pretty quickly. So if and when Mr. Prater brings this back with option 2, we envision doing another notice to make sure that's not an issue.
Commissioner Williams, ready to make a motion?
Yes, I would just move that we adopt the service review, that we make the boundary changes on all these districts that staff is recommending, that we come back to revise our policies and do the CEQA analysis necessary to add in parcels from option 2 that have greenhouse or former greenhouse infrastructure on them.
Yeah, the CEQA part, I'm not sure, Mr. Dillon. I want to get this motion right, and I'm,
Well, you're not going to give direction on what CEQA analysis Mr. Prater has to or should do. You just want him to comply with CEQA and bring that back, I think. And also, just a clarification on the motion, you're recommending that adoption of the resolution that has all those items, A through D. And then supplement to that, you're adding, bring back the policies and bring back option 2 with whatever analysis is needed. And we would renotice that just to make it clean under Mr. Geyer's
good.
point.
Okay, we've got clarity.
That's
A second?
That's
Is
right.
that, okay, a second?
a second.
Commissioner Freeman seconds. Further discussion. Commissioner Geyer?
Oh, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. There's a typo in the resolution I'd like to get fixed. There's 2 paragraph 4s, and I've talked to the clerk already about this. Second paragraph 4 would become 5, and then 5 and 6 would be renumbered 6 and 7. And without objection, the clerk will make that amendment.
I would add the renumbering to my motion.
Okay, and I assume if there are any errata in the MSR review itself, that's minor and can be corrected if anybody has anything like that. Commissioner Geyer?
Well, for clarity's sake, could we read the motion that's on the floor?
The first part of the motion is easy. It's adopt the resolution proposed by staff with minor editorial corrections. The second part, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Williams' mouth, but return with the LAFCO policies on this issue regarding wastewater services for agriculture. And secondly, bring back option 2 as proposed by the district with appropriate analysis, including CEQA.
So now I'm confused. We're approving everything, but we're carving out Carpinteria, right? Or are we approving it now?
We're adopting staff's recommendation for Carpinteria as
yeah.
well,
Right.
but we are coming back to revise the action
Okay,
We're going to adopt staff's recommendation, including Carpinteria, and you're directing a potential second step. It's not a carve-out, it is a second step, which
Got
would
it.
basically be bring back option 2 with whatever that needs to have in order for you to consider it.
and would you just comment on that, sir?
Mr. Murray?
That sounds reasonable to me. And as you talk to planning and development, one factor that might come up is that they've now proposed some intense residential development on ag zone parcels that aren't in our sphere but are adjacent to our property or our boundary. So maybe they're reconsidering some of their policies themselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a motion. Did we get a second? Commissioner Freeman, yes. So any further comment, especially Santa Maria or online?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no additional requests to speak on Zoom.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Geyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, turning to business item number 3, Madam Clerk.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, business item number 3 is to consider issuing a request for proposal for financial audit of fiscal year 2022-2023 with an RFP to be issued on May 8th, 2023, with responses due June 9th, 2023.
Mr. Prater?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, as you're well aware, our independent auditor, Bartlett, Pringle & Wolf, has been performing our audits since early 2005, so some 17 years. We've used the same audit firm. And this last engagement that we had with them to perform our 2022 audit, the commission directed staff back last May or so to come back for an RFP to solicit maybe some new enthusiasm to prepare our audits moving forward, and probably to judge whether or not we were getting a fair shake in cost for that audit, I think, to some extent. And so what is before you is the RFP to be released. The process is outlined in the staff report. It's pretty simple. We'll garner a list of firms that are available. We currently have a spreadsheet running about 91 different firms that provide audit services that we would blanket solicit to see what kind of input we would get. The caveat that I would say is last week when staff attended the LAFCO workshop, this item did come up as an item amongst other LAFCOs that are in the same boat, looking to have audits performed. And they had pretty minor success in getting RFPs returned, just because I think in general we're rather small agencies, and getting into the public sector of stuff are just not what's that viable for many firms. So I'm not sure what our expectation might be, even if we had a large list of 100 or so different firms. But nonetheless, we would garner this list. We'd send this RFP out for 30 days, solicit any responses. Staff would internally rank those and bring back and then return back to the commission of all of the proposals that were returned for the commission to decide if there was a suitable firm to prepare the audit for 2023, with the caveat of an extension for 2024 as part of the RFP process. So we'd try to get at least 2 years out of any new firm that might solicit us. If there was a preferred firm to be selected, staff would go back, work on that contract language, and then bring that contract back for the commission's final approval on that contract. So that's essentially the outline of this proposal. The other notation that I would make is that in our discussions with other LAFCOs at the LAFCO workshop, they're within, I think, the next couple of years, they're going to be due for an audit as well. And some of those LAFCOs have teamed up and kind of done a joint RFP. We could defer our RFP for audit services and join in with those LAFCOs and become a broader subset of whoever gets awarded the contract would have more LAFCOs to pull from. So that's an option for the commission as well. But with that, we'll seek any direction from the commission as to how you want us to proceed.
And would you elaborate how often they're required and what our custom is?
Yeah, good point on that. So in our research, the requirement is not, we don't have a requirement to do an audit. However, our customary has been to do one every year. And I think it behooves us to do one every year. But in my discussions with some of these other LAFCOs, sometimes they do it every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It kind of varies throughout the LAFCOs, just because of the amount of muster it takes and the energy it takes to produce that kind of level of report and the staff time on generating all of that paperwork behind that. But I am comfortable with doing it every year. Kind of keeps us transparent and clean as far as the record goes. And so that would be my preference.
But you think we may have trouble finding someone who's willing to do it, and we might have better luck at some point in the future, perhaps joining with other LAFCOs, although they may be on different time sequences. They may do it every 2 years. We may be doing it every 1 year. Would that be an impediment?
That's something that we can explore if the commission wishes to solicit of the agencies that we do have contact information for. We can see what comes back. If we get very little to no response, we may revisit this issue and go a joint RFP route.
And any additional questions? I see one light. Commissioner Kiriakou or Williams? Commissioner Stark.
Yeah, could you refresh the recollection as to why we have opted to broaden our search? Is it because this is considered a better practice in the industry, or is it because of some dissatisfaction we have about either the services or the price of our current auditor?
I don't know the exact answer of that. It was just a direction from the commission as a broad whole. My sense was we were happy with the product. We've never had any issue with the Pringle and Wolf as our auditors. I think the price has crept somewhat, and I think it is in general good practice to look at others as well. So I think that's a kind of a twofold measure, and I think the commission at the time decided to, well, might be a time that we go ahead and see what is out there.
May I make a respectful suggestion? It might be good to invest a phone call to our present provider to make sure that we've got them on the hook, that going out to bid won't drive them away and they're winding up putting us behind the 8 ball. So it might be prudent to check on their availability before sending out a broad net.
Right. I do believe it is good practice periodically to change auditors, just they may have a different lens. It's kind of a check on the work. Commissioner Guyer.
Yeah, my understanding with it is, to the special district that I'm in, that you can use the same firm, but they have to change internal auditors.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah.
Once you get too familiar with the agency,
Okay. So this is, we need to authorize release of the RFP for the financial audit. That's basically the motion. So I'll make that motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Freeman.
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer.
Well,
I forgot one thing. I forgot public comment. Madam Clerk?
yeah.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you for the record.
Okay, so did we speak to the motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. If this is informational only, does it require a motion? I thought what we were supposed to do is give direction.
This is business item 3.
Yeah, it requires, in my script, it says we need a motion.
I got it.
Okay?
Thank
Is
you.
that clear? All right, once again, would you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Yes. Commissioner Freeman.
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou.
Aye.
Commissioner Patino.
Aye.
Commissioner Stark.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, and now information item number 1, Madam Clerk.
Oh,
Commissioner Guyer?
just for clarification, on the letter on that last business item, it did say to provide direction.
Yeah, okay, great. And our direction is a motion to authorize the release, so, okay. It is, very firm direction. All right, Madam Clerk.
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, information item number 1 is to receive and file a status report on municipal service review program.
Mr. Prater.
Very good. All right. Brief PowerPoint presentation. Just a reminder, this is municipal service review on transportation-related services. It was authorized in March by the commission. We were off to somewhat of a slow start. It says 4 responses received so far. That's been up to 6. So we have a few more that have been added. The deadline to respond to our survey questionnaire was April 7th. We're now almost a month past that, and there's very busy agencies out there working hard. So we're working with them to try to encourage more involvement through this process. So we are still compiling this data. we still think we are likely on schedule to be able to adopt our end result of service review in December, as transportation-related services are a much smaller subset of services, and I think would take us less time to get through. Having said that, it also is an opportunity for the commission to kind of understand where we're at, ask questions about what we're going to study. I will pick up the notation from Commissioner Nelson about Tanglewood and being evaluated as a disadvantaged community, so we will look at that as part of this analysis, just to help identify some of those areas. Although I'm not sure if Tanglewood falls within a particular district per se. It likely is at least within the city of Santa Maria, probably, so we'll probably try to pick that up. So with that, I also like to take this opportunity to constantly remind the public that they are valued in this process, and that we have a community survey on our website that we encourage everybody to go to, both district members and members of the public. That's a very short, brief, 1 to 2 minute survey about your satisfaction about these types of services. So we like to make that plug for everybody as well.
You know, I would just add that many electeds have various newsletters and social media, and we could promote it that way. Maybe the clerk could send us each a little paragraph with the link, and we could promote it.
Good, we can do that. So we appreciate all of the exposure we can get. As you know, LAFCO often is forgotten or not remembered until there's a project before the LAFCO Commission that really has an effect on you. So it was good to see a bit more enthusiasm under our water wastewater service review. We had more public commentary to that. So hopefully we can keep that momentum going and have that same enthusiasm for transportation. So that concludes staff's update as to now.
Okay.
If there's
any questions?
Questions of that.
Anybody up north or online?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this
Any
item.
public comment? No motion needed. Information item number 2.
Information item number 2 is to receive and file an update from LAFCO and provide direction regarding LAFCO Brown Act survey.
Okay, I will present the unfortunate news that the LAFCO has closed their Brown Act survey, but I will like to present the results that they provided in that. In addition, the report also covers some information about the LAFCO legislative policies that they've adhered to. They've rolled over the same policies from the prior year, just to note for the commission, so they're same effect in for 2023. And then lastly, LAFCO board adopted their strategic plan earlier this year that focuses on the organization as a structure, its sustainability moving forward, and its political effectiveness to achieve that. And so that's what the strategic plan goes into. We have a board member as a commissioner that if they would like to elaborate more. But to get to the results, they did send out the survey results, and I'll read what they provided earlier this week. So essentially, they had 34 responses, and these all have to deal with new Brown Act legislations that's coming forward in the process.
If I might ask, were the responses from LAFCOs or just individuals?
The responses were either from the LAFCO or the executive officer. And because many of the questions resulted about what would you like to see moving forward, what was your practice in the past, that I didn't have full knowledge of, I was hoping to bring it forward to the commission to help assist in providing our answers. But they closed the survey on us, so we won't get to provide that. But essentially, whether or not should LAFCO get involved, if so, in what way? So of the 34 responses, they varied from small to large LAFCOs. On the question of what have LAFCOs done or what are they doing as far as related to digital meetings and whatnot, 74% of the respondents said that they never had held a digital meeting prior to the pandemic. And that only 8% or so had done so. 60%, on the other hand, once the pandemic hit, moved into the space and started to provide these digital meeting platforms. So there was an uptick in that. Now that we're sort of waning out of that pandemic now, 35% have returned back to in-person meetings. 56% continue to provide either phone or video two-way meeting options. The respondents replied, if not required by the law, only 41% said they would hold digital meetings of the LAFCOs. On the question of what are the hurdles for running a digital meeting, technical issues came in at the top at 91%, with 62% being staffing and 56% being cost to running those digital meetings. 94% of the respondents said they would need staff to be trained, and or 32% said they need new staff members just to maintain digital meeting opportunities. And 74% indicated that their budgets would need to be increased to continue to conduct digital meetings. And lastly, on the last question on Cal LAFCO's role on evaluating these Brown Act legislations, the general sentiment was it was a local issue, with 38% responding to that effect, and that Cal LAFCO should not get involved, or if they were to get involved, to just take a watch position. By contrast, 29% wanted Cal LAFCO to support full digital meetings as an access opportunity. And if they were involved, the types of conversations they wanted Cal LAFCO to focus on was digital access, as far as the technical aspects of it, 53%, cost of that, 52%, and disruptions to the functions of a LAFCO, as it would be an unfunded mandate, was 47%. So those are the results of that survey for the Commission's information. So that's the informational item for today.
Commissioner Stark, you have your light on?
Oh, that was an act. Question.
I thought so.
My question, my assumption correct, if some Brown Act bill comes floating along and we don't like it for one reason or another, or we do like it for one reason or another, we're free at that time to take an individual position and express that to our legislative representative. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, and we are free as a collective LAFCO to take up that issue. So the main question was, did we want, as a Cal LAFCO body, to take that up on our behalf? And generally the answer was no, or take a watch position. So we would, if we have issue with a bill or we want to support a bill, we'd have to do that independently.
Commissioner Kiriakou.
Just to follow up on that point, is that something that historically we've done, like written a letter of support or opposition for legislation or other matters of concern or controversy?
We have done that. We generally follow the guidance of the Cal LAFCO and the Ledge Committee. And so when they have an issue or want support or opposition to that, we bring that forward for the Commission's consideration, and you authorize the executive officer to write those support letters.
And then generally speaking, when we do that, it's based on our core mission of doing things like preventing sprawl, protecting agriculture, things of that nature.
Yeah, or demanding unfunded mandates on LAFCO or circumventing the LAFCO process.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from online, or Commissioner Richardson?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak.
All right, any public comment?
We have no requests for public comment on this item.
All right, so we don't need a motion on that item. Any commissioner announcements or requests for future agenda items other than the Carpinteria matter?
I'm curious about the positioning of the ag-urban interface policy on the agenda as an information item.
I couldn't slip that by you, huh?
Yeah, I'm asleep most of the time. Every day I wake from my hibernation
good
and
catch.
notice something.
So that is a future agenda item that the commission directed staff to bring back. Our intent is to bring that back in August to appoint an ad hoc committee and a chair and a program for that committee to evaluate.
Okay, and let's see, any additional executive officer comments?
One, the intent is to cancel the next two meetings, June and July, so that staff can get all of this work back up and completed, so we can really dive into the transportation stuff, work on this RFP stuff, work on this ag-urban interface. So we don't have a whole lot of driven applications that are time committed, so we're going to take a little bit of a summer off from meetings and get to work.
All right, do we need a motion to that effect? Okay, so that would then put us, any comments about that? Commissioner Starr?
I actually have a question for our executive officer. It has come to my attention that my term as a LAFCO board member, as you may remember, the commission tricked me into being nominated for the LAFCO board, is set to expire. I'm willing to run for another term or not. If anybody else wants to nominate, I would suggest that Mr. Prater, the nomination stuff is coming out pretty soon, so I'd suggest that Mr. Prater advise the commission, and anybody wants to seek it, let him know.
We will do that. That announcement should probably be coming out maybe next week or so. And nominations won't be due until likely September, so we'll have in our August meeting, we'll have an agendized packet as we traditionally do. If any board member seats are up, and again, it's a public member seat in a coastal region that is coming due, along with likely a city seat. So if there's city members.
Okay, so there's constraints.
You have to fulfill the category for our local district seat, which we're in the coastal district of LAFCO. And that nomination has to come from the chair as a collective commission meeting, and paperwork has to be submitted. And it is a 2-year seat. You don't have to be a regular commission member. You can be an alternate on your local LAFCO and still run to be a board member.
Okay, and I guess we have one additional public comment, Madam Clerk?
Chair Hartman and members of the commission, we have one request to speak on Zoom, and we will now go to Kaylee.
Hello, Commission. My name is Kaylee Ellis, speaking on behalf of the Grower Shipper Association of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. If the Commission does move forward in the future to establish an ad hoc subcommittee to study an ag-urban interface policy and surrounding issues, the association would like to volunteer to participate if you're seeking members beyond the Commission, and just would like to thank you for your engagement on these important and timely issues. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we are adjourned to Thursday, August 3rd, 1 o'clock, Santa Maria.
Madam Chair, we haven't actually canceled any meetings yet. So
All right.
I mean, it's almost certain
you don't need a motion.
Just adjourn.
All right, it's on my script. All right, we are just adjourned.